Hey everybody, we are Martin, Robert, and Francis, and this is Snakes and Otters, a pointless discussion of eternal questions. Get ready, we're about to live in your head rent-free. Hey everybody, welcome back to Snakes and Otters. Welcome to episode 51. I am Martin.
And I'm Robert.
And I'm Francis.
So this is an Our Heroes episode, and today we're going to talk about writer, satirist, journalist, P.J. O'Rourke. But first, very quickly, a little correction. We pride ourselves here at Snakes and Otters on getting things right, and if we don't get them right, we do understand humans make mistakes, but we like to go back through and mention. So, our last hero, Winston Churchill, we talked at some length about his situation as a member of the British nobility, that he wouldn't inherit a title and all that because he was the second son. That's not quite accurate. We had the result correct, but not the reason. He is actually the eldest son of Randolph Churchill, but Randolph himself was not an elder son. So Randolph was the one not in line to inherit title and everything. If he had been, he could have passed it to Winston, but he was not.
The Duke of Marlborough being the title.
Yes, very famous Duke of Marlborough. So that would have been to Randolph's elder brother, and then Winston was the oldest son and had a younger brother, John, I believe, and they both had to make their own way in the world and did so with military careers and all that kind of good stuff, and served honorably in World War I, both of them. And anyway, if you haven't listened to it yet, go back and listen to our Winston Churchill episode with that small correction in mind. So let's get on with it. Today is P.J. O'Rourke, and we'll just introduce why we're interested in him, and then we'll talk a little bit about his bio. I guess I'm the biggest fan of the three, but I was introduced to this fandom by Robert.
That's right, which I had forgotten.
So Robert had bought one of PJ's early books. It's called Parliament of Whores. Yep. A lone humorist looks at the U.S. government. And I purchased it after Robert did, after he introduced it to me, and just absorbed it probably all in one sitting, I think. It was very humorous. Yeah. And that got me into going back and buying a ton of his old stuff. But he is a baby boomer.
Yes.
Kind of a product of the 60s. He got his start then.
We won't hold that against him too much. We'll try not to. No. Being Generation Xers ourselves.
But he grew up in Ohio, did his graduate work at Johns Hopkins, and lived in Baltimore. Kind of got his start writing for like underground hippie newspapers, things like that. And it really originally started out as a kind of a left-winger type person, kind of a hippie, saw himself as a hippie. And I think, in fact, he at one time told his grandmother he was a Maoist.
Oh, good Lord.
She was worried he was becoming a Democrat, the joke goes, and he says, they're both fascist, I'm a Maoist, and her response was, well, at least you're not becoming a Democrat.
Only PG.
So he would go on to, kind of in the meat of his career, work for National Lampoon. Some of the stuff he did, editor-in-chief and things, and a lot of the stuff that National Lampoon eventually turned into those early films in the late 70s are things that he had originally contributed to in the magazine. Of course, everybody's seen Animal House.
Mm-hmm.
That's not all of it, but some of that material that ends up in Animal House is stuff that he had written.
That was one of their early films,
70s.
too. Yeah, that was one of their first. And
that was kind
there
of...
were many that came after that, but...
Yeah, sort of a proof of concept that National Lampoon could move from magazine and stage to a film property.
Yeah, well, and it's his work that really launched the movie careers of some of the most famous SNL alumni as well. So you owe a lot to him entertainment-wise.
Yes, so yeah, Belushi jumping from stage to Saturday Night Live to films are based on films. P.J. O'Rourke's involved in some of the early material that stuff's drawn from.
Right.
From National Lampoon, he goes.
Stuff. Yeah.
From National Lampoon, he moves into Rolling Stone and becomes the Foreign Affairs Desk Chief at Rolling Stone, which is a fancy title.
Wait, Rolling Stone has a Foreign Affairs desk?
Yeah. As to say, does Mick Jagger run that one, or is that Keith Richards' problem?
But it's a fancy title for. They would send him to shitty places and let him write stories about them.
Right.
And he did. He went in the 80s. He went pretty much everywhere that was horrible, and places that were trying not to be horrible. And he was there. The Philippines, as they're transitioning from Ferdinand Marcos, and dictatorship, and trying to be a democracy. Nicaragua. As they're trying to transition from the Ortega dictatorship to a democracy during the 80s and 90s, he's there writing these stories. He really had been, name an awful place, and he's been there everywhere.
I have to think. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, buddy.
I just have to think. It has a lot to do with his transition from being a Maoist to being a libertarian because of some of the horrible stuff that he saw.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. He was able to take the theory of communism, which sounds pretty good on paper for some people, and translate it into reality.
Yeah, well, when you don't have anything, communism sounds great.
Well, absolutely. Well, that's one of the reasons it's so easily the first rung that desperate people grasp after, because they think it saves them. And PJ was in a place to realize that it's not only unsustainable, it is inhumane in many respects, and that comes across when you see it applied. And I think that's one of the great wisdoms that he brought by seeing all these things and realize, well, maybe this stuff, might sound good, but it ain't working worth a damn.
Yeah. He also was very involved in automotive journalism. He's written for Car and Driver. So he's not just political stuff and not just kind of travel writer, but some varied stuff about cars. He is in what's called the gonzo journalism tradition.
Yeah, I was hoping you'd bring that up because that's essential to understanding him.
Yeah, he's kind of the I guess a survivor of gonzo journalism. I guess at this point.
For our listeners, what gonzo journalism is?
Yeah, we better define that.
Yeah, it's a school of journalism that exemplified by Hunter S. Thompson, where the reporter places himself in the middle of the events. And it's more of a reporting in a writing tradition of, instead of being this disconnected observer, you're talking about being right in the middle of the event.
So less a war correspondent and a little bit more of a biographical aspect.
Yes, it's highly biographical, and very famously, one of P.J. O'Rourke's early pieces is about being in Lebanon, and he opens the piece talking about how available cocaine is. So he's not talking about the Lebanese civil war that he's in the middle of. He starts out by going, cocaine's readily available, and my buddy and I sniffed a pile of it. And then he moves on into talking about the Lebanese civil war.
Yeah, it's a product of the late 60s.
That's probably what you lead with anyways.
Yeah. So he's always, that's a parallel that he tries to pull out in his early pieces, is some people are concerned about the difference between right and wrong. I'm concerned about the difference between wrong and fun. So
how very libertarian of him.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
well,
So he
clinical
does.
journalism is not meant to be all that serious at times. I mean, he's got a biting wit, PJ does, and man, he's good at it. And when he wants to skewer, he skewers well, and there's always a smile, there's always a laugh, there's always humor with it. And I think that's one of the great contributions that he brings is you may not agree with what he says, but you'll damn well laugh when you read him.
You're gonna laugh about it. One of his famous early pieces, again, where he kind of crosses from sort of political and brings in what he knows about cars and things like that, and all these different just humor and satire of the way the world works, very famously, is How to Drive Fast on Drugs While Getting Your Wing Wang Squeezed and Not Spill Your Drink.
Yeah, that's just the title alone is incorrect in so many ways, and yet it's funny as all get out.
And that's exactly what the article is about. It's talking about what it's like to drive cars fast while possibly on drugs and with a girl and not spill a drink. And it's great stuff, very humorous.
I used to take pride in being able to eat Taco Bell while not spilling any while driving, but this takes something like that to a whole new level.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah. Totally different level.
So let's again. He's been writing now and being published articles and full books since the 1980s. Again, very famously, around the time of the Gulf War, he published the Parliament of Whores and Give War a Chance. He went into economics, and he's done a couple of different books on economic questions, again with humor and related to his travel. Again, he's been all over everywhere. He's seen every possible system of government, basically. And I think for me, it's fun, it's informed, and it's fun, but it's informed because he's really there, experiencing it. He's not just writing from a perspective of, well, here's what I'm observing. He's living it. And I think it makes it so much more insightful about the world we live in, because he's not just standing on a corner watching.
Right. It's not ivory tower theories about what's going on. It's this stuff really happened. Now, granted, it might not necessarily be about the most serious of things, but not every bit of it is like that. He's certainly an incredibly talented writer. He'd have to be a freelancer for as long as he has and make a living at it. Because essentially, once you start writing regular books, you're automatically a freelancer. But I mean, before the book started, he was not necessarily, he wasn't a 9-to-5 writer. Even if he was employed directly by National Lampoon, it had to be a lot like being a freelancer.
Yeah. It has to be super crazy, and he's the guy holding everything together as the editor-in-chief.
Right. So, one of the things that, for those that have never read him, it's really hard to even come up with a contemporary writer who is similar. He's got a lot of people who I think have tried to imitate him. Ann Coulter comes to mind. I think she has tried to imitate his style, but she's got her own style, and honestly, it doesn't always work. Sometimes it does. And others have tried to imitate. I think maybe the closest as far as approach, not necessarily content and style, but it's a writer with less bite, and that's Dave Barry. To me, they're a little bit similar in the sense that they don't take everything seriously, and they don't necessarily want you to take it seriously, and they both may have a point. Dave Barry's probably just not nearly as irreverent.
Yeah,
right.
I think that's the big key word, irreverent. You're very right. There's nothing O'Rourke can't make fun of, hardly.
Right. Yep, absolutely.
But he can be. Yeah, it can be very poignant too, because his, part of his observation of being in these places, again, he's been horrible places when they were undergoing, horrible events, and he would be very plain about, politics isn't politics if it's getting somebody killed.
Right.
This is not theory anymore. You're getting people killed over this crap, and he wouldn't hesitate to be blistering, especially in his articles about the Philippines,
right.
about the time of Marcos. He would tell a joke about being kind of in Dante's Inferno about Marcos, and I think the gag went something like, Ferdinand's only up to his shoulders in a pit of boiling oil in hell, and somebody says, well, why is he only in up to his shoulders? Well, because he's standing on Imelda's shoulders. So young listeners, if you don't know, Ferdinand and Imelda Marcos were very famously, Ferdinand was the dictator, Imelda was his wife. She was nutty. Yeah, she was nutty as a rat in a coffee can, and she had hundreds and hundreds of shoes, and
that's what
wanted to try to rescue. Yeah, everybody else is scratching out a living, making houses out of tin sheets and banana leaves, and she's got thousands of pairs or hundreds of pairs of these Italian shoes, and kind of this Marie Antoinette figure in history of, she's trying to save all this stuff while they're trying to get out before Ferdinand gets hung.
Right. I said it earlier, and I think the more we talk about the particulars of where he went, I think it's a natural progression, which is all libertarians would disagree with me, but I think a lot of libertarians, if you look at them today, they have roots in that '60s hippie culture. Maybe not today. That culture is those people are quite a bit older.
Yeah, first generations do.
Yeah,
second generations are children of.
When you come from that '60s background, which is all about freedom, baby, love, and all that kind of stuff, libertarianism is almost a natural progression, especially if you are exposed to the horrors of what governments do to their people.
Yep.
And you end up with a just leave me the hell alone kind of libertarianism, which to me is the ultimate liberal. Don't bother me, leave me alone. I want to be free to do whatever the hell I want. And a lot of libertarians today would cringe at that, but as I said before, don't tell me what to do with my whatever is the essence of being a liberal. Philosophically, not politically. It's the philosophical thing. So I think, given his background, I think it was inevitable where he ended up without going crazy.
Yeah, he definitely moved to... Oh, sorry, Francis. Go ahead, buddy.
Well, I was going to say that he is definitely not narcissistic in his writings, though. And that's something he inserts himself in there, and he'll talk about his getting cocaine and things like that, but really he is immersed in the area that he is talking about. When he's there, you're there with him, and it's not like, we're partying over here while all this stuff's burning. No, he actually is very clear in his takedown of injustice wherever he sees it. And as Robert talked about, he can be very biting at times. I want to make sure we don't paint him as somebody that's kind of unconcerned about, I'm just doing my own thing over here and I'm not worried about this other stuff. Oh, by the way, it's going on, but it's not my thing. Let's party. Not at all. He's very, very socially conscious. He just recognizes that man's inhumanity to man, as he's witnessed it, brings with it certain consequences, I think, in his mind, that, maybe we aren't very good to each other in any time. And we just need to leave each other alone. He's not John Stuart Mill, I don't think, although he would see some kindred spirits in him with his utilitarianism, where as long as I'm not hurting anybody, I should be able to do what I want. That's a little bit... I don't think he would go there. And I'll lay that out to you guys to see what your thoughts are on that.
Well, Martin can probably speak better than I do, because he's read more of them. But I would think that's probably, I would guess he would land very much in the, if it's not hurting anybody, why does it matter kind of a thing, because, that to me that is the essence of libertarianism. Now, how committed he is to libertarianism, I could not say, because I haven't read as fully as Martin has. Martin?
Yeah. Well, yes, I mean, he's a libertarian, but he is on the conservative spectrum part that of libertarianism that lean towards not only should government be small, but what it does should be something that protects people's rights. So, I mean, I don't think you're far off, but I think the main thing for him is just, government has to be up to a certain point, and that point has to be where it protects people's rights, and then after that, it's all pretty much useless.
Well, that's probably a great point, because I think his writing about government and politics, what I have read, primarily comes down on the side of government is so bad at doing most of the stuff it does.
Yes.
Because it shouldn't be doing it anyways.
Yes.
There's a lot of valid criticism to that. Not always, but there is a lot to it.
Yeah, I mean, very famously in Parliament of Horrors, the thing is, he kind of recites through the preamble of the Constitution and says it's like, well, yeah, but when are we done?
Right.
Well, when are we done? Why do we need to keep going and more things and more things and more things? We're done. Why do we have this? I think his term is a vast, rampant cuttlefish of dominion.
That's so PJ, yes.
Yeah.
So
well, that's the kind of turn of phrase.
Yeah, he does have a great turn of phrase, and he does have a great way of framing his arguments. But, I think that's what makes him interesting to read, is that his commentary is designed to examine the why behind a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Which, of course, that's our wheelhouse. That's our bread and butter, the why. We could sit here and take one of his points and discuss it for hours, just because he's so good at framing that question.
Well, our very first Code of Honor episode that we did on quotations, his was the first.
Yes.
That Martin pulled out and went first with that one. So, in many respects, he is a godfather of our thought in many ways.
Yeah, for sure, man.
Yeah. And certainly you don't have to agree with all of his propositions to be entertained. Now, I think in today's environment, he's probably less relevant than he was 20 years ago, partially because nobody can read anything or listen to anybody unless they agree with him. So if you're not already predisposed to his opinion on things, you're probably not going to like him, which really is sad. Because
he's brilliant.
He's not there, in my opinion. It's still there, but it's not. The primary focus is not to convince you of his opinion, but to get you to think about the question. And as we all know, the convincing is the important thing now. You either have to agree with me or die.
Yes.
Well, that's right.
You're evil if you don't agree. And he would definitely, he would definitely bristle at that kind of an idea because he's seen that in action. If you don't agree with me, you're evil. He's seen that in action. Now, he left Rolling Stone in 2001, so he's not traveling, I think, as much anymore. But
he's 72.
He's 72 now. He is definitely a baby boomer. He is, I believe, a cancer survivor at this point. He's had a bout of cancer. And, it's just, Yeah, I mean, you're right. He's kind of the father of some of the wit that goes into this podcast. He's become part of my psyche. So the jokes that I make are often PJ inspired. Mm-hmm. Again, that we talked about that very first quote from our first Code of Honor episode, being, it's one thing to burn down the shit house, it's another to install plumbing. That's not from a motivational book. I took it as it's a motivational thing, but that's from an article he's writing about Nicaragua, I think it is, or Honduras. He's in a place that's in the middle of a, communist revolution and people trying to escape. I think it was Nicaragua because I think he's talking about the Contras and Daniel Ortega and all that good stuff. And he's talking about give them some credit. They did at least just get rid of the former dictator. But like he said, there's one thing to burn down the shithouse. It's another to install plumbing. And the Sandinistas did not install plumbing. It's just a swap of dictators.
So there's a lesson in that. There's a huge lesson, as we talked about. That's what I, even though I don't read them nearly as often as you do, I still, whenever I see an article, I try and read it if I have time. It's just he's great for provoking thought, and sometimes just for a good belly laugh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, he would not consider himself overly political anyway, especially not now and in his more, later on. He was more a commentator on right and wrong and how he saw things. He would use political language to use that. But I think some of one of his most telling small quotations is when he wrote one of his, Parliament of Horrors. He says the entire premise, the main argument of that book is politics is boring. He doesn't get into partisanship. He doesn't believe that. His is a philosophical approach to, and the entire argument of I'm on this side, so therefore you are evil, the devil, and must be destroyed. He would reject that wholeheartedly, saying then you missed the point, because the political discussion is supposed to be about ideas and ideals, not about partisanship. And there's kind of a universal lesson for most people that, I can't tell you how many times I've been on Facebook, and all of you will agree that, okay, here comes a partisan screed. You read it from who knows where you would expect to find it sometimes. And to me, that just, the IQ of the person that posted it just went down the crapper with me because they're not thinking.
So one of the things that I love, and we talked about this beforehand, but as we're coming deeper and deeper into the episode, I just love this quote about him because I think this is a great example of his humor and his ability to skewer both sides of any particular issue. It's God is a Republican quote from Parliament of Horrors. Because I love the internet because you can find anything. And I actually found this from his Facebook account. He says, I have only one firm belief about the American political system, and that is this. God is a Republican, and Santa Claus is a Democrat. God is an elderly, or at any rate middle-aged male, a stern fellow, patriarchal rather than paternal, and a great believer in rules and regulations. He holds men accountable for their actions. He has little apparent concern for the material well-being of the disadvantaged. He is politically connected, socially powerful, and holds the mortgage on literally everything in the world. God is difficult, God is unsentimental, and it is very hard to get into God's heavenly country club. Now, from a faith perspective, Francis and I would disagree with a good deal of that, but that's more about Republicans.
Yeah.
Santa Claus is another matter. He's cute, he's non-threatening, he's always cheerful, and he loves animals. He may know who's been naughty and who's been nice, but he never does anything about it. He gives everyone everything they want without the thought of a quid pro quo. He works hard for charities, and he is famously generous to the poor. Santa Claus is preferable to God in every way but one. There is no such thing as a Santa Claus. And that's from Parliament of Horrors. So to me, he has just outrageously and hilariously skewered both Republicans and Democrats from 25 years ago, more than 25 years ago, almost 30 years ago. And
he eviscerates both sides because he sees the hypocrisy and problems with the entire partisan process.
Right. And ironically, his criticisms from 30 years ago hold up today.
Oh, indeed, don't they?
You know,
Yeah, very famously, he said Hillary Clinton's wrong on everything, but at least she's wrong within normal parameters. It is. So that's his reason for not going with Trump in 2016. Is at least Hillary's wrong within normal parameters. He's an intellectual descendant of H.L. Mencken.
Okay.
Yeah.
Also from Baltimore. And he quotes Mencken, and I've quoted Mencken probably from reading it in PJ. Politics is an endless series of hobgoblins, each of them imaginary, and the point is to have the people clamorous to be led to safety. So I'm getting that from PJ. Again, skewering that both sides from kind of the sort of libertarian / conservative perspective, but definitely somebody who's willing to put the spack on any side of an argument.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and nowadays there's a lot to be valued in that because he doesn't care. One, he doesn't care. You have to be somebody who does not care to be able to do that. You don't care.
Yes. His bucket is completely empty of of F words. Completely out of them.
It's got a hole in it, and it's never going to be filled up again.
He's the Ian McShane in politics of that. He's the guy that has no more of those F's left to give, as I read online one time long ago. He's the guy that spoiled a Game of Thrones episode and didn't care because he's Ian McShane. That's just what you do. I don't have any of these to give. And there's a refreshing authenticity with that, I do believe.
Yeah, that's a great quote about Hillary. That I don't think if I had heard that, Martin, I don't remember it before, but yeah, that's a great, not just a great quote about that particular political race, but that's how his mind works. Yeah,
it's like Trump is such an outlier that he couldn't wrap his head around what was going on there originally. He has since written a book about the 2016 election. It's called How the Hell Did This Happen?
Well, Hillary asked, he wrote her own book. It was basically the same thing. How did we get here?
Yeah.
Like, how the heck did we get here?
I need to pick that up because I have not read that one. How the hell did this happen? The election of 2016. So let me just give a couple of the books for people who want to maybe check out PJ. Let's start with some of the older ones. Let's see here. Holidays in Hell is one of my favorites. Again, that's more of a travel type book. Republican Party Reptile, another good one that I enjoyed. Let's see, Parliament of Whores, Give War a Chance.
Yeah, that's the one I have on my shelf.
Yeah, that's primarily about the Gulf War. Eat the Rich. Oh.
The first
Go ahead,
Gulf.
Martin. Or Robert?
The first Gulf War.
Yes, the first Gulf War. Thank you. Eat the Rich is kind of an economic study, a very good one. Again, mostly related to some of his travel. All the Trouble in the World. Again, another one from the early 90s to mid-90s. He takes on things like multiculturalism and all that good stuff and gets into it. He traveled to the Balkans during their disintegration. And then some of the later books, The CEO of the Sofa. Well, during the time it really got weird. Let's see. Driving Like Crazy is a compendium of a lot of his early automotive work, again, including how to drive fast on drugs while getting your wing-wang squeezed and not spill your drink is included in that one.
That's got to be a very short list of books that have the term wing-wang in the title.
That's true. There's not many of those out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a great article. Again, one of his early ones. Don't Vote, It Just Encourages the Bastards.
Yeah, I like that title, yeah.
From 2010, yeah.
Yep. Peace Kills, America's Fun New Imperialism. That's a mid-2000s
Yeah, that was around
book.
the time of the second Gulf War, if I recall correctly, 2004.
Yes. And if you want to just get a whole big chunk of this stuff at once, there's a really good one called Thrown Under the Omnibus. It takes a lot of this material and puts it into a nice giant hardcover 2-inch thick book. So I really like that one as well.
Yeah, that's a good primer if you want to read him in all eras, because he covers a vast breadth of time here. You know, he starts writing, books are in the mid 80s and running up through, through 2016, 2017. So if you want to really figure out where he's at a given point in time, the Omnibus is a great place to start.
He has a new one coming out September 2020, according to his publisher's webpage. It's called Please Calm Down.
Oh, wise words at any time, but more perhaps especially for here.
Yeah, really. So yeah, I just got to lift my glass of bourbon to PJ. This is regular Woodford that I'm drinking today for this episode. And as I had mentioned to Francis before this episode began, I had this right after a little bit of the Devil's Cut, which I had drank the last episode, and it was almost sweet compared to the Devil's Cut. It was very interesting, so I've been enjoying this one quite a bit. What do you boys have?
I'm still finishing off the 1792 myself. I had just enough left for one last glass, and it just seemed a crime to just leave it there in the bottle. So it's being imbibed neat with no ice, just straight out. And, I'm learning to like that. I was not a fan when we first started this. Everything had to be iced. I'm okay with it out now. Perhaps I'm maturing myself, I'd like to think.
Well, I'll have to try that. I am still a fairly fresh bottle of Larceny. So I've got another nice glass of Larceny with a little ice in it. And it's pretty fitting to be hitting the bourbon when you talk about P.J. O'Rourke.
Oh, very true.
Yes.
he would dig that.
He has bite, and yet he is warm at the same time.
Yes.
Well, there's something about being on some kind of mind-altering substance that I think he would appreciate.
Oh, no doubt.
It is, everybody has a bucket list, and a lot of people's bucket list, hey, I want to swim with the dolphins, or I want to climb some mountain, or my bucket list, the very top of it is have a drink with P.J. O'Rourke.
Oh, really? Yeah. Nice. You hadn't told us that before. That would be cool, yeah. But you got to have a long period of time, several drinks, and lots of things to talk about, which I'm sure he would have no problem with that.
Well, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that's people that you would like to have met. One of my many regrets is that when we were young and stupid, as opposed to being old and stupid, that Francis and I did not make a cross-country trip to Thousand Oaks, California. And that was because at the time I knew of it, we just never really got around to it. It's one of those things, wouldn't that be cool if we did it?
Yeah.
But the great Jack Kirby was known for his hospitality. And there are so many stories of fans who just showed up at his house. And
wouldn't that have been
Oz
amazing?
Would invite them in, maybe give them a sandwich, and he'd show off whatever he was working on, and they'd spend an hour or two chatting with the fans who were brave enough to show up.
Isn't that amazing?
I had never heard that.
Yeah. He was the king for all sorts of reasons. And wouldn't that have been a fun trip?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because in the early 90s, when we were, as you say, young and stupid, that'd have been pretty cool. It had taken a little while, but, it's worth
a college trip, wouldn't it?
Yeah, wouldn't it, though? It would have been a great trip just for nothing else. Drive all the way out there, see Jack Kirby. Okay, now let's go home.
Yeah.
And we still find ourselves in awe of that trip even today.
Yeah.
Yep. That would have been peaking early.
That's the heroes episodes. We talked a little bit about this in show prep. Sometimes the hero episodes are Thomas More, people who shook the world. But sometimes the heroes episodes are Jack Kirby and P.J. O'Rourke. Mm-hmm. They shook the world in their own way, but they're special to us.
Yeah, they're fun.
Fun and influence our thinking and the way we look at the world. And, you guys have given me new inspiration. That the story about Jack Kirby, I just never knew that. I never knew that he was hospitable to fans. I'm going to have to work on my bucket list and find some way of doing this.
Where's PJ live?
He splits his time between New Hampshire and D.C.
Well,
so he would probably be hard to find, and if he's traveling and working on stories, and of course he'd be even more difficult.
Well, he does do speaking engagements occasionally. That's how you figure out. You find out where he's going to be speaking near you, and make a road trip, boys.
Yeah, but the speaking engagements would be harder to arrange a sit down and a drink because he's going to be on a very tight schedule.
Perhaps.
Then again, if you buy him a good bourbon, he might just sit down with you.
Yeah, bring him a nice bottle, and with goodness knows we could arrange that. He might say, hey, I'll have a sit with you.
Leave the bottle.
Yeah.
We'll leave the bottle.
Yeah. This is maybe a bottle of that Blackout Racing Stables bourbon.
Oh, well, that's very easily done. Yeah, the great folks at Blackout Bourbon have been very, very good to us. And in fact, the 1792 I'm drinking is one of their branded ones. And it has been well used, as we know. And there's lots of great ways of, bourbon just goes well with everything, especially intellectual discussions, I think. So, and what better intellectual discussion could you have than with somebody like P.J. O'Rourke, personally?
Yeah.
Yep. Assuming you could put together a coherent thought while in his presence.
Well, I would think the same
take us all to
danger
school,
with,
wouldn't he?
Yeah, the same danger with Jack Kirby. You're reduced to doing that Chris Farley bit of, remember when you did this? Yeah, that was really cool.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, yeah, I'm surprised we would be able to speak at all. Kind of blubber like, I love you, man. I love you. Oh my God, that's kind of love I have for you, man. It's about as far as I could get.
Part of that.
Yeah, I would definitely be the same way.
Well, part of it's looking back on those guys with older, more mature, and hopefully somewhat wiser eyes. At the life, we were far more appreciative of Jack Kirby than we were probably when we were first exposed to him. So, and certainly
we were late to the party compared to his earliest careers, though. We weren't even born when he started, for goodness sakes, because he's a greatest generation guy. He's our grandparents' age, we were fortunate to catch the tail end of much of his actual career. But also, there was some homage and awe of him at this time. It was like, this is the king, guys. And I'm thinking, look, and you watch his stuff.
Even though he was not doing the Fantastic Four when I first started reading it, one of the first books that I bought regularly was Marvel's Greatest Comics, which was a reprint book of the Four.
Yes, so they were coming out where we could buy them, and they were new to us.
Yeah, they were new to us. And that's where I fell in love with his rendition of the Thing. I think it is just phenomenal. But, when you're really young, flashy tends to be more interesting. That's why the Image guys got so popular in the early 90s. While some of them may have had some very technically good drawings, those that were really good at drawing boobs and butts and taking Playboy layouts and making those into poses in the comic books and what have you, they sold a lot of books. For obvious reasons.
But they don't stand the test of time compared to King Kirby.
Yeah. And certainly, you can't deny that other artists are more polished than Kirby as far as their craft goes, but very few can touch his creativity. That's what makes a guy like him important. So what makes a guy like PJ important is that he is so good at his craft that few can touch what he's able to do, even if not as many people appreciate it.
All right, so that sounds like a mission now coming out of this episode. We need to find out how to get in touch with PJ, and you guys need to help me achieve my dream.
We're here for.
That's right. I'd like to think we could hold a good conversation with the man. I think we are to the point where we could do that. We bow to the master of him, of course, but I'd like to think, who doesn't love a good conversation?
Yeah.
With Renaissance men such as us? Well, so.
Yeah. And again, certainly my humor, and I think the humor that comes through the whole podcast is definitely a descendant of PJ's mindset and his humor.
Yep.
So that's, like I said, that's a window into Snakes and Otters. That meeting PJ O'Rourke and having a bourbon with him is at the top of Martin's bucket list.
Hear, hear.
Not swimming with the dolphins. That's boring.
No.
I can't talk to a dolphin.
Hey, amen to that.
Yeah, because the tuna's just not the same since they took all the dolphins out.
Oh, my goodness, how politically incorrect you are today, sir. Right. Oh, well, shall we talk about next episode, perhaps?
I think we should.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
we're right at 45 minutes here, I think.
We wrap up here our appreciation of PJ O'Rourke. And so, Francis, what is next for pop culture?
Yeah, pop culture is our next one. This is one of mine that I've kind of pushed for. We're going to talk about the samurai movie genre and how underappreciated it is, how influential it is, and how maybe if you're not familiar with it, you might want to be, because there's some really great stuff to be found there. We take those. It's very effective at taking those universal story archetypes that all of us love so much, as Robert would say, and putting them into a totally new and fresh perspective that we in the West don't always get, and unless we're into it, we don't always appreciate. So we think we're going to take you down a trip that you've never been down, maybe not, and hopefully you'll find some fun in it. So join us next time.
Awesome.
All right. Good job, boys.
Thanks for being with us here every week at Snakes and Otters, a pointless discussion of eternal questions. Be sure to spread the word on your social media accounts. Follow us and retweet us. We are on Instagram and on Twitter at Snakes and Otters.
Let your friends know that they can find us on Podbean, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, and on YouTube. Just search Snakes and Otters Podcast to find us, and please remember to leave us your comments and reviews. It helps people find us.
And you can always send us an email at snakesandotterspodcast@gmail.com.
I'm Martin.
I'm Robert.
And I'm Francis. Catch us next week. Same snake time, same otter channel.